We can't put this on at 8 o'clock. The affiliates will kill us. The times are changing, Arthur. We need to take a risk.
It's 1974, and NBC has a problem. Every Saturday night, the network airs The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Carson is the king of late night, the most powerful man in television. But Carson wants weekends off, and NBC needs something to fill the slot. So they hire a 30-year-old Canadian producer named Lorne Michaels. His brief is simple. Find 7 cheap, unknown comedians. Put them in a studio and make television that nobody has ever seen before. What happened next would change American comedy forever and destroy several of the people who made it possible. The 7 comedians Lorne assembles are nobodies. Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, Gilda Radner, Lorraine Newman, and a man with dark curly hair, a wild energy, and an appetite for excess that would eventually kill him, John Belushi. They call themselves the not ready for prime time players. They set up on the 17th floor of 30 Rockefeller Center. And on the 11th of October, 1975, they go live on American television for the first time. The very first joke in the very first monologue of Saturday Night Live's entire history is a drug joke. Host George Carlin stands on stage and talks about football moving its hash marks, then pauses and says the players found them and smoked them. The audience laughs. NBC executives do not, because what NBC didn't fully understand, yet what nobody fully understood, was that for the writers and performers on Saturday Night Live, drugs weren't a problem to be managed. They were woven into the fabric of the show itself, as natural as the scripts, the sketches, the live broadcast. Drugs were part of their humor because drugs were part of their lives. To understand why, you have to understand the moment. America in 1975 is still reeling. President Nixon had resigned the year before in disgrace after his associates broke into Democratic Party offices. The Vietnam War had ended in failure. Trust in every institution, government, media, corporations, was collapsing. SNL producer Dick Ebersol would later describe the show as the post-Watergate victory party for the Woodstock generation. And at a post-Watergate victory party, cocaine was the drink of choice. Here's what nobody tells you about the early years of Saturday Night Live. Every single episode, all 24 of them in that first season, each running 90 minutes, was written in the week before it aired. Not months in advance, not even weeks. The week before, Monday to Saturday, on air on Sunday night. Cast members would come in on Monday morning and start pitching ideas, pitching characters, pitching jokes, selling themselves in a room full of people who were all doing exactly the same thing. The pressure was total and it never stopped. Writers would work through the night, through Tuesday, through Wednesday, through Thursday. Sleep became a luxury nobody could afford. The show demanded everything, every hour, every idea, every last fragment of creative energy, and it kept demanding more. In that environment, cocaine wasn't just a recreational choice. For many people on that show, it felt like a professional necessity. The show itself would sometimes say, you can't do a 90-minute live broadcast every week and do cocaine. And a number of people on the show felt exactly the opposite, that you couldn't do a 90-minute live broadcast every week and not do cocaine. The drug arrived in the writer's room first, then the green rooms, then everywhere. Passed around like coffee, like currency. The white powder that kept the engine running through Monday night into Tuesday morning into the brutal final push before the cameras went live. And in this environment, this pressure cooker of ambition and exhaustion and cocaine, one person rose above everyone else. Not immediately, but fast. His name was Chevy Chase. In season 1, Chevy Chase becomes the face of Saturday Night Live. Not because he's the most talented, not because the others respect him, but because he has something none of the others have in quite the same way. An instinct for the camera. A natural ease. A quality that reads as effortless coolness even when the material is deliberately awkward. His defining segment is Weekend Update, a fake news desk, Chevy behind it, delivering the week's headlines with a deadpan precision that feels genuinely new. I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not. That line, that single line, becomes one of the most famous catchphrases in television history. By 1975, New York Magazine calls Chevy Chase the funniest man in America. NBC sees him as the first genuine potential successor to Johnny Carson. His work in Season 1 wins him 2 Emmy Awards, but behind the scenes, the picture is very different. John Belushi watches Chevy Chase get famous, and it infuriates him. Belushi believes with total conviction that Chevy Chase's talent is inferior to his own, that the spotlight should be on him. And every time someone stops Belushi on the street and says they love Chevy Chase, it's a small humiliation he stores and never forgets. The other cast members feel it too. Chevy is difficult, mean sometimes. People who work with him describe encounters that are miserable and horrible every single time. He behaves badly. And nobody really understands why, because nobody can quite explain what drives it. What is clear is this: Chevy Chase and John Belushi hate each other, and the hatred is mutual, visible, and sometimes violent. Most infamously backstage before a show, when the two men come to blows in a corridor at 30 Rockefeller Center. But Chevy Chase doesn't stay long enough for the feud to really define him. After Season 1, just one season, he walks away, leverages his newfound fame to go make movies, and has considerable success doing exactly that. And this is when Saturday Night Live becomes John Belushi's show. With Chevy gone, Belushi fills the vacuum immediately. He brings the characters he's already been developing, the samurai warrior, who applies his sword skills to every conceivable situation, Henry Kissinger rendered as a gravelly-voiced nuclear threat, a cocaine-fueled Beethoven, and he pushes them further, harder, wilder. He takes Weekend Update for himself, develops his own personas, his own catchphrases, and where Chevy used his success to separate himself from the ensemble, Belushi, at least at first, uses his to elevate the people around him. It's Belushi who pulls Dan Aykroyd toward music. During a sketch called The Killer Bees, the two of them first perform blues music on television. It's a throwaway moment, but 2 years later it evolves into the Blues Brothers, Jake and Elwood suits, hats, sunglasses, an entire mythology built around two men and a music genre. The Blues Brothers become so iconic that by 1980 they have their own film. Their first album reaches #1 on the Billboard 200, goes double platinum, 2 million copies sold, and this is before we get to Animal House. In the middle of Season 3, Belushi takes time away from Saturday Night Live to film National Lampoon's Animal House. He flies from New York to San Francisco to Eugene, Oregon, and back again, over and over, a schedule that should be impossible. He describes himself as a wreck. Animal House makes $141 million against a $3 million budget. It is, at that point, one of the most profitable comedies ever made. John Belushi's salary at SNL has now jumped to nearly $100,000 a year. And this is where the story starts to turn dark, because more money means more cocaine. A lot more cocaine. At his peak, John Belushi is spending close to $500 a week on drugs, primarily cocaine. That's not a guess. That's documented by Bob Woodward, one of the 2 journalists who exposed the Watergate scandal, who spent years researching Belushi's life and wrote a book about it. Sometimes Belushi would take a hit half an hour before the show, occasionally during the show itself, offstage between scenes. People around him describe opening their supply and watching him work through it systematically, methodically, until there was almost nothing left, and the cocaine was changing him. The warm, generous Belushi who had championed his colleagues, who had helped make other people's careers possible, was being replaced by something meaner, more unpredictable, more frightening. He arrives late to rehearsals, refuses to play parts he doesn't like, terrorizes production assistants. In one incident, he yells at an assistant because photographs aren't hung to his satisfaction in his office. He sweeps everything off her desk. Then, half an hour later, brings her a signed Animal House poster, an apology, and an explosion delivered in the same afternoon. He demands more creative control, and he uses it in ways that damage other people, specifically the women. After season 1, Belushi asks Lorne Michaels to fire the female cast members, refuses to perform material written by women writers, pressures others to write Gilda, Jane, and Lorraine out of episodes entirely. He was appalling, and he knew it. Lorraine Newman had been using drugs since she was 14 years old. On SNL, surrounded by cocaine and pressure and late nights and the grinding loneliness of being in a new city far from everyone she knew, her habit worsened dramatically. She was young. She was homesick. She was frustrated by how little airtime she was getting, and drugs were the way she dealt with all of it. By season 5, she has retreated so completely from the production that crew members rarely see her. When assistants deliver her scripts, they find her lying in bed. She gestures weakly, says to put them over there, and disappears again. She would later watch footage of herself from that period and say she had no memory of shooting it. Garrett Morris was suffering too. Despite being a Juilliard-trained singer with genuine comedic range, his role on the show had narrowed to something humiliating. He appeared repeatedly in drag as a maid, as a nurse, as Diana Ross, as Ella Fitzgerald. His ideas for his own material, including a song about New Orleans, were shut down. And Belushi, who had once talked to Garrett about including him in the Blues Brothers project, went cold on him after hiring a new manager. Garrett believes to this day that racism played a role in that shift. Pushed to the margins, increasingly isolated, Garrett Morris started freebasing cocaine. The decline culminated in a breakdown during rehearsal, where he claimed an invisible hypnotist robot was controlling his body. It sounds absurd. It is absurd. And it is also the sound of someone in serious trouble with no one left to help them. Not everyone is falling apart in the same way. Gilda Radner is holding things together, but the cost of holding them together is enormous. She has a gift, Gilda. A rare ability to walk into a room full of people in pain and make them feel better. Her comedy comes from a place of pure warmth. Every character she creates has a beating heart at the center of it. She is, by almost every account, beloved by everyone who works with her. But Gilda is not happy. She is chronically dissatisfied with her own appearance. She has an unhealthy relationship with food that will eventually be identified as an eating disorder. She pours so much of herself into supporting others, into being the person who cheers everyone up, that there is often very little left for herself. She dated Dan Aykroyd before the show. Now she develops a relationship with a newcomer who joins in season 2. A man who arrived at Saturday Night Live with his own complicated relationship with the law. Bill Murray is 26 years old when he's hired to replace Chevy Chase, but his backstory is far from clean. 6 years earlier, on his 20th birthday, Murray was arrested at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. He was attempting to smuggle 10 pounds of cannabis worth $20,000, or roughly $170,000 in today's money-past customs. He was caught after joking to a fellow passenger that he had 2 bombs in his luggage. He was charged with possession, ordered to appear in narcotics court, given 5 years probation. His college career was over. He dropped out, moved to New York, found comedy gigs wherever he could, eventually joined Belushi on the National Lampoon Radio Hour, and from there found his way to 30 Rockefeller Center. Murray's arrival changes the dynamic of the show again. He is impossibly charismatic, quick, genuinely funny in a way that doesn't feel like performance. It feels like this is just how he is all the time, even when nobody's watching. But even Murray can see what's happening to the people around him. Even Murray can see that the show is consuming people as fast as it's making them famous. By 1979, it's over for the original cast. Belushi and Aykroyd leave for bigger projects. Lorraine Newman departs carrying what she'll later describe as a hornet's nest of drug problems. Garrett Morris goes. Gilda goes. And when NBC refuses to give Lorne Michaels the time off he needs, he quits too. Saturday Night Live is, in NBC's own words, a death ship. The network promotes a producer named Jean Doumanian to try and save it. Jean builds an entirely new cast. Charles Rocket, Ann Risley, Gilbert Gottfried, Denny Dillon, Joe Piscopo, and a 19-year-old from Brooklyn who announces on his very first day exactly where he intends to go. I want to get famous by the time I'm 21. I'm 19 now. I give myself 2 years. His name is Eddie Murphy. Season 6 is, by almost every measure, a disaster. Half its episodes score below 6 out of 10 in viewer ratings. The new cast, thrown together too quickly, never finds its footing. And when featured player Charles Rocket drops the F-word live on air during the Season 6 finale, something that genuinely shocks a nation still unused to that kind of broadcast, he is fired immediately. So is Jean Doumanian. The show nearly dies. NBC considers canceling it entirely, but they don't. And the reason they don't is Eddie Murphy. Because even in a season of disasters, Eddie Murphy is unmistakably, undeniably special. By the early 1980s, Eddie Murphy is the reason people watch Saturday Night Live. He knows it. He says it. Live on national television without permission from anyone, he looks into the camera and announces, "I know you people tune in to see one of the stars of 48 Hours host the show, and damn it, you're going to see it." Live from New York, it's the Eddie Murphy Show. He is 20 years old. He has no business being this confident, and he is completely, absolutely right. Murphy's characters Buckwheat, Gumby, Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, Velvet Jones become immediately iconic. His energy transforms every scene he's in. While the show around him struggles to find its identity, Eddie Murphy is a force of pure creative certainty. He arrives as a teenager. He leaves as a superstar. But while Eddie is pulling Saturday Night Live back from the edge, the man who built it is spiraling toward destruction 3,000 miles away. John Belushi's post-SNL career is not going well. His Blues Brothers film is a hit, but cocaine is found in his trailer during production. The studio hires a dedicated, full-time person specifically to keep Belushi away from drugs. They fail. His next film, Continental Divide, opens to devastating reviews. Critics call it a massive disappointment. Within a day of the notices appearing, Belushi has collapsed back into everything he'd been trying to escape. He shows up out of control at Lorne Michaels' wedding. He makes one final cameo appearance for Saturday Night Live in a Halloween segment, and then his world becomes very small. On Sunday, the 28th of February 1982, John Belushi checks into Bungalow 3 at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in West Hollywood. Over the next 4 days, he goes clubbing on the Sunset Strip and Santa Monica Boulevard. His manager sends him money, which he uses immediately to buy drugs. On the night of Thursday, the 4th of March, 2 visitors arrive at Bungalow 3, Robin Williams and Robert De Niro. Both stay briefly, both leave. And then a third visitor arrives, a Canadian backup singer named Kathy Smith, nicknamed Silver Bag, known in certain circles as a dealer. What happens over the next several hours is documented in toxicology reports, court records, and the accounts of people who knew Belushi well enough to understand what was coming. At around 8 in the morning, Kathy Smith watches John Belushi fall asleep. At 9:30, she becomes concerned about his breathing and wakes him to drink water. He opens his eyes, and he says the last 5 words he will ever speak. "Just don't leave me alone." But she leaves. At 12 o'clock noon, Belushi's personal fitness trainer Bill Wallace arrives at Bungalow 3. He finds John Belushi dead, aged 33. The cause of death is a speedball, a combination of cocaine and heroin injected directly into the bloodstream. People who knew Belushi well believe it may have been one of the first times he had ever used heroin. Kathy Smith is extradited from Canada, charged with second-degree murder, and eventually pleads no contest to involuntary manslaughter. She serves 15 months in prison and is deported. Dan Aykroyd, who had been avoiding Belushi's calls in the days before his death because he was exhausted by Belushi's behavior, listens to the final voicemail message too late. "When your friends reach out to you," Aykroyd would say afterwards, "get back to them quick. That's the lesson." and I live with that all the time. Saturday Night Live continued. Lorne Michaels returned in 1985. The show found its footing again through the late 80s, adding new cast members, calming its edges, toning down the drug-fueled chaos that had defined the original era. Wayne's World arrived. Church Lady, Pat. The show felt safer, more mainstream. Viewership stabilized but fell from the 13% of American households who had watched every week at the peak of the cocaine years down to between 7 and 8%. Then came the 1990s, and Lorne Michaels made 5 new hires that would define the next decade. Adam Sandler, Rob Schneider, David Spade, Chris Rock, and a man from Marquette University in Madison, Wisconsin, whose childhood hero had died in a bungalow in West Hollywood 9 years earlier. This horrible man-beast who lives in the studio. No, wait, not the ghost of John Belushi. Chris, you're the beast. Chris Farley knew exactly who he was worshiping, and he couldn't help himself. Belushi was Farley's obsession, his model, his North Star. He wore Belushi's actual pants from the SNL wardrobe. He copied Belushi's physicality, his explosiveness, his willingness to go further than anyone else in the room would dare. David Spade, who watched this up close for years, eventually confronted him about it. Don't try to be like him. Don't even look up to him. You're fine on your own. But Farley couldn't hear it. He had the talent. Nobody who ever saw Chris Farley perform questions that. He had something Belushi had, to a quality of absolute openness, of his whole heart visible in every single thing he did. Within 20 seconds of watching him, you felt like you knew him. Felt like he was performing specifically for you. His brother Tom worried about him from the start. Saturday Night Live seemed mean and cutthroat. Tom didn't see how someone as genuinely vulnerable as Chris was going to survive it. His breakthrough came with the Chippendale sketch Farley and Patrick Swayze auditioning for the same male dance troupe. Farley pulls his shirt off, and there is an instant where something complex crosses his face, a hesitation. He knows that some of the laughter is about his body, not his talent. He knows, and he does it anyway, because making people laugh is the only thing that matters to him, even when the laughter is complicated. The characters that follow Matt Foley, the motivational speaker who lives in a van down by the river, the Gap Girl, the Lunch Lady, are beloved, genuinely, durably beloved. They are still quoted today. But behind all of it, the addiction that began with high school drinking and grew through college into cocaine and then into heroin is getting worse. After his first season, Lorne Michaels takes Farley aside. "We don't want another Belushi," he says. Farley goes to the Hazelden Clinic for 28 days. Complies just enough to get through it. Comes back to New York and doesn't follow up with meetings or a sponsor. Sobriety lasts for a while. Then an SNL read-through happens where the writers haven't written him into the show. And that night, he does 5 bags of heroin. Back to detox, back to sobriety, back to relapse. 11 times, 12 times. The exact number varies depending on who's counting, but everyone who was close to Chris Farley can give you a number somewhere in that range because they watched it helplessly every single time. In 1995 and 1996, Farley's commercial success helps him escape. Tommy Boy, Black Sheep. He's hired to play the lead in a new animated film being produced by DreamWorks. The character is a big, clumsy, misunderstood ogre who lives alone in a swamp and just wants to be left in peace. They call him Shrek. Farley records 80 to 90% of Shrek's dialogue. His voice, his cadences, his particular way of turning vulnerability into comedy, all of it is in the recordings. All of it is captured. The performance is never finished. By the end of 1997, the physical damage of Farley's lifestyle is visible to anyone who looks. He is sweating through shirts. His face is puffy and pale. At a strip club in the final weeks of his life, a friend watches him rolling up $50 and $20 bills and throwing them at a dancer, and everything in them wants to go over and just hold him. In October 1997, Chris Farley returns to host Saturday Night Live. Chris Rock is on standby, ready to step in if Farley doesn't make it through the show. Farley makes it through. His timing is still there, his instincts still work. But between lines, if you listen carefully, you can hear him breathing too hard. 2 months later, on the 18th of December 1997, Chris Farley is found dead in his apartment in Chicago. He had been with a woman named Heidi Howes. Like Kathy Smith 15 years earlier, she had left him alone in the morning. Like John Belushi, the last thing Chris Farley said to the person leaving was, "Don't leave me." He was 33 years old, the same age as John Belushi. The cause of death was a speedball, cocaine and heroin. Dan Aykroyd has spent decades telling anyone who will listen, be very, very careful. Cocaine was big in their time. It killed a lot of people. He lost 3 friends to it. Lorraine Newman got sober in 1987 after 21 years of using, starting from when she was 14. She got out. Chevy Chase got off cocaine in 1986. Garrett Morris, after a drug-related robbery attempt, eventually got clean. Jane Curtin, the most grounded of the original 7, the one who never really had a drug problem, built one of the longest-lasting careers of the entire group. Sitting steadily at the center of a storm she somehow never got swept into. And Gilda Radner. Gilda, who held everyone else together while quietly falling apart herself. Gilda died in 1989, not from drugs, but from ovarian cancer. She was 42 years old. Bill Murray, who had loved her, described her death as something he never fully recovered from. They were brilliant, almost all of them, and almost all of them paid a price that no amount of fame or money or critical acclaim could justify. What does it mean that 2 of Saturday Night Live's greatest performers died at exactly the same age, of exactly the same cause, speaking almost exactly the same final words? What does it mean that the show that made them famous is still running tonight? That the band will begin, the lights will come up. Some institutions outlive everyone they consume. SNL is one of them. And somewhere on the 17th floor of 30 Rockefeller Center, someone will step to the edge of the stage and say the same 7 words that started all of this 50 years ago. Live from New York, it's Saturday night. If this story hit you the way these stories hit people who actually care about what comedy costs the people who make it, then you're exactly who this channel is for. We tell the stories behind the shows, the real ones, the ones they don't put in the anniversary specials. Subscribe if you haven't. Every video goes deeper than the last one. And if you're watching this and you already subscribed, share it with one person who'd care about this story, because these people mattered. And they deserve to be remembered as more than punchlines.